Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. We're a little later in bringing this podcast episode to you this week. The thought was teams could be so crucial and so critical that maybe we just wait for teams this week to be able to give you the best opportunity to have the best advice heading into the upcoming round of footy. Then teams dropped. Unless you're a Darcy Parish owner, there's not a whole heap of stuff that really happened. But the good news is there is still plenty of really relevant conversations we want to have with you right throughout this episode. Joining me on this podcast, as he has right throughout the 2023 season, is Rids. Hello, mate. How are you?
Yo, how you going, mate?
Good. It's good to have you. And you hear him a lot in the preseason, and every couple of weeks he bobs up like a Chad Wingard goal. I'm talking about Kane. Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm great, MJ. Good to be on with you and Rids. It feels like we're going old school, which is maybe a theme that's been talked about in the week. So it's probably fitting that Rids and I join you in today's podcast.
And MJ, don't you think Kane's our tactical sub when Mini Monk's not available these days? So
very happy to fill that role.
If you're happy to take the role of Harry, we can make that work. All right, there is a ton of stuff we want to get through on this episode. We want to take some of our Patreon questions. Of course, if you'd love to become a Patreon supporter, all the details are in the link of this podcast description. A special shout out to Tristan, who just in the past 6 or 7 days become a premium tier supporter. So thank you to you, Tristan, for jumping on board. We've got to talk about buys. I want to talk about trading priorities. It's an interesting point in the season. Will Setterfield is an interesting player. I specifically want to stop down around him. We got to talk about cash generation and the ever-evolving ways you play the game. But quickly, let's look at teams. And Kane, there was some concern and plenty of rumor and innuendo always flies around on a Thursday, doesn't about, I saw a certain player at an airport. I didn't see a certain player at an airport. There was plenty of talk that Atkins wouldn't make it in. We've seen a couple of players get opportunities to debut. O'Donnell at the Bulldogs. We've seen Clark get an opportunity to play at Geelong. Arguably, though, teams were relatively kind to us this time around, except if you're a Darcy Parish owner.
Yeah, well, Darcy Parish was the one, MJ, wasn't it? And it's always annoying when it's at training, late in the week, even if it's on the minor end, to do it on a Thursday, especially a calf. It's probably a minimum 2 or 3 weeks. So that's a really awkward one, especially if you've already burned all your boosts in a DT and a SuperCoach, because you're probably eyeing off 1 up, 1 down, if not 2 down, 1 up, with how little cash gen we have. So that's just awful timing. And I'm sure there'll be coaches that have had many bullets this year, and that's just another one because he has been just a really solid guy across all formats, and you were just about to hit a really nice stretch. Brisbane is a tough game at the Gabba, but it's a Darcy Parish type conditions as well. Those greasy Queensland nights can just suit a contested player like him, and then it really opened up. So unlucky timing.
Yeah.
Again, at least you're going to have a few options. It wasn't an in-game injury, so it hasn't affected any of his scoring or price. But other than that, MJ, as you said, Atkins holds. That's fine. But also, with Weller out, it would have been a bit of a shock, wouldn't it? They really pushed Melbourne. He was good in the game against Richmond, Atkins.
Yep.
To go over to West Coast with guys who, Ainsworth didn't get up. Weller didn't get up.
Flanders gets
Holman
dropped.
didn't get up. So he's really, we haven't probably learned anything. We probably would have felt better if we knew Weller was going to be named and really see how that mix fits. That's probably the thing with Atkins that scares me is, yes, he's going to get this week. He's on the bubble in SC and DT. What next? It does get a bit tricky. And at that price bracket, I feel like you need 2 or 3 minimum. Now, obviously, AF, he's had a few price jumps. But
sure,
O'Donnell was a shock. Again, that's an incredible story. To go from a Cat B to making your debut in 5 weeks is outrageous.
It's nuts.
Interesting they said that he's the Treloar replacement because he's a bigger guy.
Yeah.
So that'll be really fascinating. But again, you're probably just having a look on Saturday night in what should be a really, really hotly contested game against the Blues. There's a lot of feeling, I think, in that Carlton team, and obviously the Dogs are just rolling. So other than that, it's pretty quiet. And obviously this Sunday's quiet because we do have the doubleheader on Friday. So we've got to be really careful with our loops. We've got to be really careful with what trades do we have to make before Friday? Because it can get a bit messy, and especially with all the DPP we have, sometimes you're sitting on your trades to see final teams named on a Saturday, only to be tripped up by a DPP that's locked or a loophole you thought you had. So nothing too much from the team's front, but we'll see what tomorrow brings. And there is a few teams that, will have their final sessions on a Friday. I'm talking St Kilda with Rowan Marshall. If you're relying on an Angwin. If you're relying on an Angwin. So, a lot of those Sunday teams, Friday's that real sort of final test before. So they sort of name them up. So that's just something to be wary of. But hopefully that information drips through before the Richmond Cats game tomorrow night.
Yeah, hey, MJ, I'm going to jump in. Okay. Please. Parish, I just want to call this out nice and easily right now. This just shows how much of a dynamic luck plays in some of our trading, whether it's last week, whether it's this week, whether we own, like Parish, okay, he would have been chosen as a unique player, probably over Zach Merritt, so that hurts even more from that aspect. Now, what about the Setterfield discussion that you raised a minute ago?
Yeah, let's have that.
Think about the luck factor there. Now, we've had probably half of the population of fantasy and everywhere else, SuperCoach and everyone, either trade out of him or hold him last week. So what we've got there is, well, does that mean that he's going to go back into those CBA rotations? Does that mean he's going to play as that big-bodied mid with no Parish? We just don't know what happens there. But if you held Setterfield this last week, there's every chance you're going to have to hold him now. Because I think you have to. After this game, as Kane just alluded to, that draw opens up like no other all the way through to the bye now. So it's almost like, wow, again, luck playing a massive part in this.
Yeah, it's a huge variable. If you want to identify this fixture that we're alluding to, it's Brisbane at night. So we know that's going to be, as Kane alluded to, potentially quite a slippery, dewy, contested style game. And then the next month, it's arguably the best matchups you're going to get from an inside midfielder. It's Richmond, it's West Coast, it's North Melbourne, it's Carlton. And then it's the bye, and gives you that perfect pivot to 6 teams through there. I'm with you, Rids and Kane. I think if you're a Setterfield owner, I think we said it on our round review episode that we give to our Spotify subscribers and to our Patreons. It was, if you're jumping off the Setterfield train, no problem. It was last week, or you're waiting to the bye. And if you're holding now, any concern of, he gave me a rubbish score, it's just gone now. You've just got to commit to it.
Yeah, and just with Setterfield as well, he's a big tackler. He's a monster tackler.
Every chance he goes 90
conditions in Brisbane, he might have 10 to 15 tackles that game. You just don't know. That's like we saw Dunkley do it last week with that monster. There's every chance Setterfield, and I'm not saying he's the same as Dunkley, but the thing is, he builds his score around tackles. So, if he's playing that role and he's playing inside, he's in the CBA mix, obviously there's a fair chance he's going to go very well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm really curious. A lot of people that listen to the coaches panel are certainly on the more passionate end of their fantasy footy, probably on the side that take it most seriously, but are often people that play multiple formats and enjoy playing multiple formats. It's why we cover all of the formats, and sometimes the advice we give is more process or concepts and constructs, not just format specific, although we do break that down. But I'm curious, Rids, and maybe I'll start with you on this, and very keen to have a conversation with you about, there are coaches like Mini Monk. Let's talk him up for a second, coach, our very own Mini Monk for a second. Let's talk him up for a second because he's not here. He's had incredible success over the past couple of years across all the formats. And there is this notion, Rids, that sometimes is you can be a great coach in one and struggle in the others because the formats all need to be played differently. How are you seeing the games evolve at the moment with the change in fantasy footy across the 3 main salary cap formats?
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to call out everyone in the coaches panel knows what I've been doing this year and, bits and pieces. Yep. I've been doing a little bit of work in getting better equipped with AF. to try and see how to play all three at the same time, because I've struggled with it myself, okay?
You've won Dream Team, you've been close on it there in SuperCoach, and AF has been the one that sometimes has eluded.
So, yeah, SuperCoach, I think, top 100, 200 multiple or whatever it was last year, multiple times, whatever it is. So, but the thing is, I've never been able to greatly grab the concept of AF because of... And I mean, a lot of people having discussions, and there's a great pod out there right now, okay, with a guy that I've been doing a little bit of analysis with AF, and it's VAM, and it's on the Traders right now. It's a coaching, one-on-one discussion, but I guarantee you, go out and listen to it, okay? If you want to better understand things with AF specifically, go out and have a listen to it because it's well worth listening to. But I've spent most of this year with VAM and analysing AF and how to actually better understand and I think we called it, what did we call it? The new day philosophies of AF, which pretty much says that I'm just old and I'm stuck in my ways pretty much. Yeah. But I want to just call out that, okay, like I'm in no way an AF expert. I'm just getting a better understanding around that, but I do know fantasy, I do know footy. I've been around it for years. So, but that's why I wanted to call this out. So there's a perfect discussion around Jack Zeeble last week. And Kane, I know you're on the unlucky side of not being a Jack Zeeble owner last week. Now, and I mean, you could probably explain it as well as anyone. The thing with Zeeble, like, when we come from a SuperCoach and Dream Team perspective from years gone by, we would look at a season-long keeper, yeah? So, is that guy going to maintain his role for the year? Because if he does, 100%, he's going to be absolutely viable in the top. And what do we often say, MJ? The top 6 defenders or the top 6 forwards, you've got to be around that.
Yep.
Whereas AF, in the way that AF has come up, okay, means that the definition of keeper, season-long keepers, is now, let's say, blurred at best. I don't think there is anything that actually says that it's a keeper for the season, whereas years ago we always wanted to get the best 8 mids or the best 6 defenders or the best 6. The only line we really can do that now is in rucks because there's only 2 positions. Yeah. But as a Jack Zeeble over, okay, no, so in AF, Jack Zeeble represented value. He had a role change. Amazing, okay? And people that jumped on when he was still representing value is getting absolutely happy days, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the older style, and I call it the older style tongue-in-cheek, says a Jack Zeeble type, oh, no, we don't see, it's a rebuilding team, he's older, we don't know what his purpose is at the moment, he would be better served as, say, a forward in that team or a mid in that team to help the kids through, okay? Sure. So then, because of our ways of thinking from years ago, we would go, oh, well, potentially he doesn't keep that position. So that means he's going to be a iffy season-long keeper for that position. So then we go, no, we're going to pass on him. But it's such a dynamic between all of the 3 formats. It really becomes a real question mark. And I mean, Kane, as a non-owner last week, and you were highly ranked in SuperCoach just as like last week, that's a massive hit, yeah?
Yeah, it's over probably 100 points to the player I had because it's one of those ones, as you said, Rids, when you pass on him at 360 after 2 games and you see the role then, and we know just 2 years ago he had that role and he was brilliant. He was, one of the best premiums in the competition, wasn't he? He started like a house on fire and tapered off, but he was still 100 guy. So, when you make that call before the price changes to pass on him, and he keeps sort of ticking along. And again, he wasn't really hurting. It was obviously a really nice pick. But clearly that score last week, the absolute monster ceiling score, that's when you get the hurt. That's when the guys that have him get the cash gen. And a lot of that risk of a role change is mitigated because once you see that role change, you're jumping off at a really good price and he's made more cash than a lot of lot of cash cows. So you just have to accept that it's worked out beautifully. The flags for mine at that point was super young side. The price tag is awkward. Historically, now he's obviously proven through 8 games that it's worth it, and also the body as well. It is something that has let him down. So, I probably felt validated the last few weeks just seeing, North had lost 5 in a row. They obviously lost their 6 in a row against the Saints, but that was the monster score. So, as Rid said, you probably make that call saying he's not going to be a season-long guy. I don't want to have to waste a trade getting him back out. But clearly he's ticked the 2 boxes we want. He's scored a hell of a lot of points.
Yep.
And he's generated a lot of cash. So you just got to write that down as one you missed and move on. And I think that's something that also comes into it. Once you pass at 360, do you want to jump on a few weeks later for 440? Yes, that might be something that clearly would have proved great because you would have copped the massive score in your favour. But sometimes, like we know, the game theory is going against. If there's a big group of people and it went from 4% to 18% after that second game, you're saying this is a guy that's got body issues in a poor team that's going to be trying a lot of things. Maybe I don't want to go down that path. So I think there's just ones where you just doesn't work out, doesn't it? And you just have to say, well, I did it for these reasons. Clearly,
and there was logic attached to those. Yeah.
Again, body, young team, all those things I said, but he has just proven it. You can't get angry at him. It's not Zeebel's fault. It's, you pick the players or you don't pick the players. But clearly, as Rid said, the reason it's interesting is that is an old school price range. You would never touch a guy in that bracket with that age, with that injury history in that team. But clearly with the extra trades, a lot of that risk is mitigated with the way people build their team. They don't mind getting 30 to 60K sort of just value baked in. It does make the upgrade process a bit easier. And if you time it with a premium that's 60, 70K down, I do get that with the increased trades, you can build your team. And then conversely as well, you have boosts. So to actually access players like a Zeeble in this bracket is an easy fix off a mid-pricer. So that's probably where the game is changing. I still think the core of the game is picking the best players and price is always important, but obviously the output is what determines if it's worth the price tag. So it's a fascinating mix, and I think Zeeble is one of those guys that the teams that are probably up the top have him because he really has delivered on a regular basis.
Yep. To go back to your original question now, MJ, is how do we play all 3? And I mean, this is massive kudos for guys like Mini Monk, who are absolute superstars across all 3 formats. But the thing is, you really need to separate all 3 judged by the way that you're best served to, and your team pretty much drives that conversation, does it not? Because it depends. And I heard that awesome conversation between Mini Monk and Kane I think it was last week, where there was 2 ideals being spoken about. Kane was taking a more gun and rook type of strategy. Mini Monk was building on value and then modifying it as he went through and adjusting as he went through. And neither is the wrong way to do it. It's just... in that aspect, okay, someone like Kane is playing the long game. So let's just look at Zeeble for a second.
Sure.
Now, come round 15, round 16, Zeeble might not even be playing as that back junk role, whatever the role is at the moment. Because let's be honest, there's less junk in a tip, mate, than what I saw on the game last week.
It's not pretty. Clarko said this in the press conference. We're not playing pretty football, but we're trying to stay in games. And that's what they're trying to do, is stay in games. It means players hold on to the ball a bit more. So great for fantasy, terrible for the eyes.
So right now, 15 love Zeeble owners. But guess what? In round 16, when he becomes a forward or a mid, or his body doesn't quite come up one week and they decide to rest it and give a kid a go, it might be 15 all come to Kane. We just don't know where this goes, at that point in time. So that's why it's really team specific on what best serves you. Now, someone like myself who because I've been playing for whatever years, 20 years, 25 years, whatever it is, and I'm more built to be that gun and rook taking the long game approach, I might be better off going with that because I'm out of my comfort zone when it comes to this new age technology, thought process, whatever else you want to call it, of being like living the moment. What used to be about 5 or 6 years ago, MJ? What was it? YOLO, was it?
No, don't do it. Oh, no.
No, but that's what it is, though, isn't it? It's a new dynamic of that. And, I mean, after playing for so many years, the fact is you have to adapt to the game that's being played now. You can't react to what happens. And you've got to be able to then accept what's happened has happened, just like what Kane did last week as a non-Zeeble owner, and go, you know what? Well done. It's worked for you this time, but it may work for me next week.
And I think that's an important piece there, Rids, is we're talking about obviously specific examples, but it's these sliding door moments across the season and across the formats that have determined so much about how our year has gone. If you put a month ago a Jai Menzies on the field, well, that's hurt you with that single-digit score. If you started a Hayden Young over a Nick Dacos, that's totally changed the outcome of your year. You paid up for Oliver, which I don't think was a bad play across any formats. I know some AFL fantasy coaches would say it was not the right play. I totally disagree. I think it's a point of you can pay up for big premiums. You just need them to score well to make it worth your while.
Or you just need them not to be getting injured at half time with a role change in the game and cop in some bad luck. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's the important piece in this conversation to factor into the variance of luck, the variance of things that come and go, the variance of this is an interesting year. We'll talk about cows in a second, but we're 8 weeks into the year and politely speaking, we're looking at Rory Atkins in Dream Team and SuperCoach and going, we know we might only have 1 week of price movement.
Now, you said Rory Atkins, MJ, so yes. I'm going to include Rory Atkins in the Zeeble conversation right now.
Yeah, please.
How do you play all 3 formats? Let's have a look at Atkins. He's almost the guinea pig this week. Yeah. Dream Team. Okay, let's call out Dream Team right now. If he plays tomorrow and goes...
Which is named 346K, break even of minus 67 in DT.
So let's say he's going to play, but I'm going to say if, because we know what laid outs and everything else that happen these days. If he plays tomorrow and goes okay, hits up a 70, 75, we're looking at a $100,000 increase first week. Mm-hmm. Okay, first price rise. Yep. So straight away, Dream Team, he's a no-brainer. He's 100% no-brainer because the worst-case scenario is you've already banked the cash, you take him down to the Drury, whoever, next week, and away you go. Okay?
And you're talking out of a player like a McKenna as an example? Yep.
Exactly right, because you're freeing up the cash from that down, then you actually banking the cash rise, then you're also banking the cash that you go down. SuperCoach, however, it's a little bit awkward. And Kane and I have spoken about this all week. His price is right at
203,000.
But it's more around the scoring. He had a 68 last week in SuperCoach. So that means his highest score off the first round that he had is going to drop out straight away. So if he drops a 60 tomorrow in SuperCoach, you're only likely to see a 50, 60,000 price increase over a couple of week period.
That might not be enough.
And we're not even talking about a guy with solid job security at this point in time with all those names, no Holman, no Ainsworth, no Weller. And we just don't know what's happening. I mean, even Dew spoke about Constable today being close. Mm-hmm. And I think he was referencing Fiorini, whatever, the pastor man. I'm just hopeless with pronunciation.
That's fine. I got you, buddy.
But okay. Let's take it to a new dynamic. So we've got a no-brainer absolute option in DT. We've got probably a pass, leaning towards a pass in SuperCoach at this point in time. Now let's look at AF. We've got a guy who's priced at 450,000 with a negative break-even who's going to make quite a bit of coin, but that's only if he plays 2-3 weeks. So he's really borderline right now because we do have viable rookie options at a cheaper price point.
Williams. Sorry, I just had that cough.
So you think about Williams, okay, who's 100, and let's just say it what it is, okay? He's 100,000 cheaper. He's got the same scoring potential. He's probably got better job security. So,
I think he's got a better buy for what you're trying to get out of him too, with around 15.
And that draw, though, MJ, everyone's focused on Butters and Rosie right now. Go have a. They all play for the same team. It's the same draw. Williams is the same guy, and he scored a 90 last week.
Yeah.
60 the week before.
If you think you traded into Butters a week ago because of his upcoming draw, and you're not even exploring Williams right now, you're probably doing yourself a disservice a little bit. But you can see what I'm trying to say here. It's just you've got to try and separate the formats and come up with an approach. Who fits what format? Who fits your team? Because you might actually go, I play all three. I'm going to trade into Atkins this week in Dream Team. I'm going to pass on him in SuperCoach. And I'll probably end up going to Drury early in SuperCoach, but he's at that lower price point of he's a basic.
Yeah, he's 102 in SuperCoach. Yeah,
so he's just makes a lot more sense there. But AF is the one that really interests me. I don't know which way this goes. It's a toss of the coin and it's not a toss of the coin for me. It's going to come back to the luck factor. If you trade into him and he gets dropped next week, you're in trouble.
Well, you need a parachute for it, don't you? You need a parachute plan.
If you don't trade into him and he plays 2 or 3 rounds, he's going to make enough and score enough to justify trading into him in AF. Correct. So this is where that luck
and the
factor.
Matchup, Rids, that's the other thing, though. You're staring at a West Coast matchup at Optus with all the space in the world in a game they should win with a game plan that on recent form looks to be very mark heavy.
In the back line, yeah.
That's what I think gives you the appeal, just to go, gee, as you said, if they win, which they should, it's a pretty conducive role for points.
I'll tell you what, though, if I said to you, Kane, let's think about that for a sec as well. If I said to you he scored 100 this week and got dropped because of all those...
That's my next point. I would not be shocked. Well, that's the thing. The Weller thing is what probably gives you a little bit of confidence. If he's got some soreness in that knee, and that was an incredible return to come back so quickly off his ACL. That was incredible.
Career scores too.
And he has been sensational. But that does give you a bit of concern. If Rory does his job, Suns win. And in the last 4 weeks, they have been really, really good as a team.
Yep.
Maybe he does hold it down. And that's Rid's exact point. The parachute's a lot cheaper in AF than it is in SuperCoach. And that's the thing I think you got to weigh up is you really need instant reward, one, to get points this week and a quick bit of cash because that could be the only price rise you get.
Yeah, so I want to come back to AF and Atkins in a second and Drury. I think there's a lot of people that are looking at the combinations of, if they're not getting upgrades, Rids, they're looking at the likes of Drury, they're looking at Atkins, they're looking at Williams. So I want to come back to that in a second, but Kane, let's come into SuperCoach in a moment, and there'll be some parallels in Dream Team in this conversation, but the price point is certainly different. You've got the likes of a Weddle who is sitting there. The narrative is we should see multiple games throughout the year from him, but Hawthorn have already shown us multiple times this year. Mackenzie's an example. Happy to give kids a couple of weeks, rest for a week. Couple of weeks, rest for the week. So that's the pattern there. Rids has already alluded to a Drury of the capacity that coaches could go early. So you've got these guys in SuperCoach, and it's comparable in Dream Team. 130s, 102,000, and then you're going up 100K to the Constable. Not to the Constable, sorry, to the Atkins type. And this becomes the dilemma too in SuperCoach, maybe more so than Dream Team. And even though it's there is, yeah, I might generate 100K more, but I might be able to do that by not spending as much in my initial investment and being able to capitalize on a lower score break even. Talk coaches through that philosophy. It's like, yeah, he's got the scoring over them, but I might be able to use money.
Well, that's exactly it, MJ. I think that's the exact thing is again, and take Atkins out of it. That's the hard thing with these price brackets, because on Atkins, I'd probably prefer a Sam Simpson in a different line in a similar sort of price range, purely because the way things are falling, the job security's, gone through the roof in recent time. But if we stay with an Atkins, say via Weddle, it is 70K difference. So clearly off the bat, by making that downgrade, say it's a Connor McKenna, there's an extra 70 grand to make an upgrade. And upgrades have been a real challenge this year. And we're getting to that point where, are you staying in the low 500s with a guy you don't mind? Are you trying to get to someone that you feel really good with? Are you skimping even more and shopping in the 460, 470 range in SuperCoach, which can have great upside if you get it right, but it doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence? Clearly, the hard thing with Weddle is you don't feel great on the field. You feel like it's probably a 40-50. The thing I like in his favour is the pedigree.
Yeah.
Pick 18 in this Sam Mitchell system, first year, has earned a spot. Really athletic player, can do a bunch of different things. Seems to have gone straight past Denver Granger Barras, who we know there's already some trade rumours circling about a fresh start for him. So that's really, really encouraging. And the thing I do like really is just accessing that extra cash. It's so much easier for Josh Weddle to generate 100K. He just has to really go 50s. And I look at Atkins on the flip side, MJ. It is really tough. He needs to be 75, near on 80 to get that same 100K.
Yeah.
And you don't have 100K up your sleeve to pull the trigger on. Now, in time, you would recoup that 100K when you finally move Atkins out. But for just say a month, 5 weeks, that 100K that you've spent extra has to be seen on the field. And I think that's where immediately, and again, in my opinion, Weddle's got better job security. He's at least in a side, like you said, that's sort of rotating 30 players through this 22 to 23 each week, which in SuperCoach is not the worst thing, because really there's one buy you shouldn't need him for, which is clearly the second buy, Geelong and Gold Coast.
Round 13.
And he misses with his own buy. But then you're only really managing 2 buys. And if he does get a rest in there, it's just not a massive deal.
Yeah.
Whereas, an Atkins, if he's out of the team next week and you've gone down from a McKenna, a really safe on-field guy that's there for you each week, and that's what Riz always talks about. You ideally want to be taking the guy that's on your bench down and go up with the guy that's on the field, because it gets really dicey when you start taking McKenna's, Ashcroft's, Chandler's off the field and take one of those guys up, one of those guys down. You start looking at a Chandler and a McKenna, MJ, that's been giving you 160 points a week.
Yeah.
If that's replaced with a Weddle and that's 50 points,
well, you
or
need
an
your
Atkins
primo to
even
go
worse
big.
and that's 0, you need your primo to go big. So that's the fascinating thing that's, I think, tricky for coaches, and actually probably why Atkins is an option.
Yeah.
Yes, people probably want a Weddle and they want to save Drury for next week to get their maximum downgrades. But they go, I can take McKenna down to Atkins. That's 100K. Give Atkins 3 or 4 weeks. He makes another 100, 150K. I get the logic. The clear big risk, though, is exposing a Weddle, these guys that you really don't want on the field.
Yeah, that's right.
To the field when Atkins gets dropped the following week, and you might only have 30K extra to show for it. So that's the hard thing, and I typically just default to the cheaper guy if they're similar, because it is so much easier for that cheaper guy to generate cash. It might just take a 75, and as a key defender or a medium defender, a few spoils, an intercept mark, the game flows the right way, they can pop. Whereas an Atkins, he's barely getting anything contested. He can't waste the pill once, or that DT score is going to be outshone in the SuperCoach score. So that's where Rids is spot on with the difference in the formats.
Yeah, that's good.
SuperCoach is not Atkins' game.
No.
Especially with the way they're playing. It just doesn't give him maximum bang for buck.
No, it's good. So, Rids, we alluded to these 3 sort of downgrade people that we're looking at. Now, not everyone's maybe looking to do a double downgrade move in AFL fantasy, but we do have these guys at the moment available to us. Williams, who we've talked about, I think he's one of the best buys in AFL fantasy this week, both in fixture, in what he does in your forward lines, and knowing that he'll pick up DPP in just a couple of weeks' time. Atkins, we've already spent a bit of time on, and then you've got a Drury. So there is this tension for coaches in AFL fantasy this week. Do I double down? Do I do these double sideways maneuvers and restart cash, alluding to the guys like Jinby, Van Rooyen, Green that we could move on? And for basically not making any cash in our bank, we will make cash through what these guys will give us this week. Or do we look at a Drury who should still be quite attainable next week around that 250K, much like Angwin was after 2 games, and get these guys now? Or is it much more, like you alluded to, bang for your buck, go all the way down, get that points working for you on the field, get those big upgrades? Which is the way you'd be looking at now that you've been processing AFL fantasy over the past 2 months? What's your take for coaches there?
So it's an interesting one this week, okay, because the people keep referring, and again, I just talked about old time thought processes and everything else. This double downgrade, okay, really comes from the old days where we didn't have boosts, we didn't have anything. So what we used to do was we'd free up the cash the week before, and then we'd do the big upgrade the week after.
Yeah.
So, and that's where the double downgrade started. You know, AF has sort of transformed that a little bit. Yep. But I sort of say to people, rightio, let's look at rookies. Rookies are there for 2 reasons. At the start of the year, we are going to need solid rookie scoring to try and boost our team's scores up week to week, okay? Sure. And that's why the guys like an Ashcroft, like a Sheasel, although he's probably a bad example at this point because he's running as a premium, a Chandler, a Pedler. Yeah. These guys have been worth their weight in gold, okay? Yeah. But what they do, though, is they're also building that cash up. Mm. And what happens is you're building your cash up in your team, and then suddenly what happens is you can downgrade to the next option, and then you can use that money to apply and, get better. You better your team on field. Sure. Now, we shouldn't be using that thought process around double downgrading this week, because the thing is, people are looking at a Fergus Green to be moved off. He's not scoring points on field, and he's not going to better your on-field scoring. Now, he might be on your field, but guess what? He shouldn't be at this point in time. The second point about this is his cash generation's now stalled with that score last week in AF anyway. So it's not a double downgrade, is it? Like if you're going to a guy who's not even playing this week to a new rook that is playing, you're just doing it for a cash gen grab. Now, that's all it is trying to build your team value up even further so we can actually hit the buys and start doing it. Someone like a Williams, MJ, is the interesting one. He has an amazing draw, as I've already mentioned earlier. He's got great scoring potential right now, and he's got a fantasy-friendly role. He's playing that junky halfback distributor role that we all love in fantasy. He even went 90s last week. So again, I'm not going to call that a downgrade, because the potential is here that you're going from a guy on a rook on your bench or whoever it is at this point in time to a Williams. Let's say a Fergus Green to a Williams. You're freeing up a little bit of cash out of that, or you might even be, it might not be much in it anymore. Sure. But the thing is, though, you're adding scoring potential to an on-field rook, and you might actually be increasing your scoring potential for your team, especially with that friendly matchup against North Melbourne this week.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes we focus so much on the premiums or the mid prices and the upcoming draw that we forget to actually go, you know what, that also benefits our rookies. Like,
it does.
And I mean, I know there's always exceptions to the rule and everything else, but someone like a Williams, he has to be at least explored, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I mean, I know people will say he's too pricey, but in comparison to what? So my question now is, if you've got 2 rookies off your field right now, as we're just about to enter the buys, and you're going to move them, let's just say to Chesser and let's just say to Green at this point in time, because I know they're common names that are in a lot of teams right now. Let's say a Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
Why would Roberts, who's injured long term with a round 12 bye anyways, to a Drury be a downgrade or even be considered as a downgrade? It's not. It's actually an upgrade because the guy's playing. He's got a round 15 bye. It betters your bye structure. It gives him more opportunities to play and make money because that's the sole purpose of the rookie, yeah?
Yep.
Like, of course, you can't get bang for buck in that. I think the term these days, and forgive me, I'm getting old, okay? So it's hard for me to keep up with you trendy young folks. But the sugar hit, okay? We used to say we'd want the instant reward for the trade or whatever else back in the 1900s, like when I was born. But it's now the sugar hit because you want to get that instant reward if you trade into someone, whether it's that cash, whether it's the points, whatever it is. So that's why I'm sort of highlighting here. It shouldn't be seen as a double downgrade. Like if you're trading into Atkins this week, MJ, you're doing so to improve your points on field, yeah?
That's the hope, yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't be regarding Atkins as a rookie at this point in time. I'd be saying he's probably a low-priced mid-pricer because he's been around for years. He's mature age. Like his price point is around that mid-price, but it's not really like a Setterfield mid-price range. It's probably a lower end. That's why we're getting really, really, really iffy at times with some of these conversations because we're not considering Williams is 100,000 less than Atkins.
No.
So that's why it's becoming a real weird conversation at this point in time. And I know that a lot of people listen to us. They've probably seen me floating around on Twitter streams and everything else for AF to get a bit more knowledge. I've been talking to past winners of AF and I often chat, and I won't mention names, but they'll know who I'm talking about. I often chat in Twitter and everything else, DMs and stuff with people. I've been talking, I mentioned that pod today. Like VAM, I've been doing analysis on AF with VAM. And he was in that pod with Warney earlier on today or yesterday or whenever it was, and he was talking about he had an absence and he's coming back. Like it's been awesome, just to have that sort of exposure. And that's why it's sort of like interesting to work it out. There's no right or wrong with this. Sometimes we get lucky in AF or in any fantasy game where it just all aligns to us. Like in SuperCoach this week, MJ, I'm lucky enough. It's taken a bit of planning to do so, but I can actually do one downgrade, one upgrade, and I can trade into Noah Anderson this week at the expense of, Brett Daniels. I mean, that's how lucky things can actually be at times. I can trade out of a Green into a Drury and then move a Daniels into a Anderson if I can. And I mean, I know there's people listening to that have often been able to, we're fallen into luck. How many times have we tried to downgrade or upgrade to someone and we're $100 or $200 short? How many times have we done that? And it's crazy in AF, It seems to happen every second week. Why can't we do this option? But sometimes we luck in and it ends up being $0 at the end of that trade. And we go, you beauty, that's a sign from the DT gods that we're in luck this week. But, it's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So we want to hit some Patreon questions in a moment, but there's two things I want to make sure we just quickly cover off. We want to touch base on the buys. Round 12 is fast approaching. There are 4 teams that we want to look at and want to get some probably more broad advice, but talking about should we consider trading into them in a moment from you, Rids. But Kane, I want to talk about trade priorities because while not everybody's in a place of considering two downgrades, they might be looking a boost in DreamTeam and SuperCoach and doing it. They are looking at these guys that are pushing towards their buy round, pushing towards their potential capped out price, and they're stuck in that process of who do I tap out? And I want to pose 2 names to you, same team, same buy round, to try to help people through that process. Ashcroft and McKenna. Both, you could arguably say, have done their job, and you could probably look at moving them on. equally, you could say, I'm going to run you both to your bye or do something there. So talk coaches through how they should be approaching their priorities of moving off certain players to actually make sure they're making the right choices for their unique team.
Yeah, it's a really tough one, MJ, because even just starting it this week, both these guys have really good numbers at the Gabba. And they're at the Gabba the next 2 weeks, Essendon and Gold Coast. And it only takes one score, particularly in DT and SuperCoach, where it's the 3-round rolling, to really reset that. And like you said, there's still 3 games for those teams before the bye. So that's 3 chances to have a full reset of the price structure. And, both of those guys had poor scores last weekend against the Blues, which can be a tricky matchup despite the Lions winning. But I think the hard thing, MJ, is what are you doing on the other side? What are you getting to? What does it cost you on field? If you're going McKenna up, Ashcroft up, McKenna up, Ashcroft down, or vice versa, okay, Primo in, Cow in, those guys have been performing really well. If that Cow has poor job security, if it's just a downgrade to force the upgrade, I don't think it's worth it. I think these are guys that we know have rock solid job security. They play in one of the best teams in the comp. To move them on, if it's not a Cow that you want to play on field, or it's not enabling someone on the bench that you feel really, really comfortable with, and let's be honest, MJ, there's not many teams that feel comfortable with their bench. We're just happy if they're named, let alone saying, go out on the field and give me 50, 60, 70 points. There's really not many guys, because the guys that do that and have proven that are at the price tag we want to tap into it to allow the upgrade. So you think of your Ollie Hollands. If you feel like he's going to give you a 60 each week, he's just been great. But we want to start harnessing that cash, don't we, and putting it on other players' heads. And you start looking at the Matty Roberts we've been stuck with, the Constables. That's soaking up a few spots. We know a lot of people just have a Nick Madden. They don't have a Samson Ryan or a Radagalia there that's been a cash generator. So it gets really, really tough. So that'll be my main thing is it's fun to upgrade. We know that's the most exciting part of the game. But again, McKenna and Ashcroft, they're giving you 140 points a week, more or less. Sometimes even a little bit more, depending on the matchup. Sometimes it's even, 180. So if you're really forcing that downgrade and putting a guy on the field that has poor job security, might be spitting out more often 30s and 40s. And that even might be a guy like a Davey, that you might have to bring a Davey onto the field.
Yeah.
He's just not really giving you those consistent scores. So the upgrade that you may get of 100, 110 player, really, it's not really doing it for you. You'd be better off just being patient with the bench, maybe fixing the bench if you need to get some of that cash gen in, because it does take time with the cash gen. That's the hard thing in SuperCoach and DT is you don't just need 3 games. You need 5, 6, 7 to really get it to a point where you can cash in.
It's true.
So I know it's exciting. So my advice really, MJ, to cut a long story short, is it might not be worth the upgrade if you're forcing it. If you don't trust the Cow coming in,
that's good.
Don't be sacrificing 2 guys on the field that are rock solid job security, have shown scoring power, just because you want to have another premium in your team. It just might not be worth it. And especially when they play the first bye, it's going to be pretty easy for everyone to get through that first bye. So think about what they're going to do for you in round 13, 14, 15. And again, I know being patient is painful for a lot of people, but in the long run, if you forced that and you got to a premium and, you got that premium and then all of a sudden you're burning a hole in that midfield or that back line or that other line that you've had to sacrifice, it can just get really, really ugly. And it's amazing how, and I just have a feeling with Ashcroft in particular, he's going to be going for a lot of coaches. It was a poor score last week.
Sure.
He bounces back, drops that ton, beats the premium that you trade in.
Oh my gosh.
And you start going, geez, I really forced that rookie in. I didn't really want him, but I wanted the upgrade. And we've just seen that story before. And it is crazy to think, but we're 8 rounds in. We're 8 in. It feels like we've been playing forever. I don't know about you guys, but there's 24 rounds now, MJ.
Yeah.
We know how tough it gets in the back end. Yes, we've got some cows potentially on the way with the mid-season draft, but that's usually 3 or 4 at best.
Yeah, and then there's Wardlord. We'll get Sardis. We'll get another.
Yeah, but they're at a price tag, MJ, that's
at the
not
top
exactly
end.
not giving you much cash. You're having to spend money for some of these guys from some of the cows we have. So I just think, I know it's a boring answer. I know upgrading's fun, but especially with these guys that have shown scoring power and still have cash to make with a good score, I just wouldn't be pushing the issue just for the sake of, to use a phrase, upgrade cadence. I just wouldn't be doing it because you think you have to. Sometimes you just got to sit there and say, no, I just need to let the bench, stew a bit longer, create a bit more cash, let that other premium maybe drop.
Yep.
And just be a little bit patient, because it does feel like it's a year where every bit of money is going to be really, really important. And we're still at the stage where we do need the bench to be contributing, if not cash generation, at least 40s, 50s that can provide us cover.
Yeah, that's a really good comment. Remember, a third of the way through the season so far. So plenty of fantasy footy left to go. We want to get to the Patreon questions, but Rids alluded to it before. Round 12 is fast approaching, a really critical juncture for two reasons. One, a new set of DPPs will hit the game. We'll talk about them more over the next couple of weeks. There's some very tantalisingly good prospects we might get. But Brisbane, Sydney, Fremantle and St Kilda all miss that week. It's dangerous to give generic advice without seeing the 30 variables, how many trades have been used, boosts if they play a format with it, cash in the bank, all that stuff. But is it worth trading into any of these guys, Rids, a couple of weeks out from their bye?
It is, but you got to be careful because every team's unique, okay? So if I've got, because there's 4 teams that are missing round 12, okay, on the bye, and then you've got 2 teams for round 13, which means pretty much round 13, everyone's going to have enough. We should all be having 22 players on field pretty much for round 13, no matter what.
Agreed.
Now, if you've got 22 for round 12, that might mean you're very viable to trade into a Mills or a Brayshaw or whoever
Sinclair,
whoever it is, okay? So that's why every team's got to be unique. But like someone with an Ashcroft, and I'm just going to go back to what Kane said, because it's a very, very important point. Don't look at it as just round 12. We're talking about Ashcroft, we're talking about McKenna, we're talking about whoever it is, okay? They're some of the best job security rooks out there.
Yeah.
So Ashcroft, after a week off, pretty much, unless he gets injured, he's going to be playing round 13, round 14, round 15.
Yep.
Like, same with McKenna. Like, he's going to play those 3 rounds. So if you've got, and it's only best 18 across the formats on those bye rounds. So if you've got 22, 21, 20 playing for round 12, I wouldn't be trading out of those guys, like, because they're going to make a nice little nucleus of your best 18 entering the later bye rounds. Now, that's just my point on that, because I think it's really important for people to really understand that. Whereas Ashcroft and McKenna, like, if you're trading into someone, like, let's just say Ashcroft to Mills, and let's just use AF for now.
Okay? Yeah, holding the buy structure.
Holding the buy structure. That is valid, yeah? It's always been valid. But what does that leave you for the next 2 rounds? So don't count the numbers as a whole. Actually go in and put a line through some of your dead rooks, because we all know our benches right now are looking pretty thin. Like, we've got a few red dots building up on there. So put a line through those names and only really include it, because you may be surprised. You might only have 14, 15 premiums in one of those rounds, and you might actually have rooks that you're counting as a Roberts, as a Sheldrick, as a Johnson, as whoever it is. You know, you've just got to be very careful about this with your buys. But trading into a Brayshaw, trading into a Mills, trading into one of those guys is team specific.
Yeah, some really good advice. All right, we've got a couple of minutes left to go before we've got to wrap up this episode. I'll fire these Patreon questions to you both. Give us your best thoughts on them. Of course, want to join the Patreon community, support the coaches panel, get extra podcasts, hidden access to community groups, connections to the podcast, and a bunch of other content rewards. All the details are in the description of this podcast. SuperCoach question for you, Rids. No, we'll throw it to you, Kane, actually. Causa B7 says, what's the best way to climb the ranks through the buys in SuperCoach with cash generation being challenging this year?
Well, it really depends on your risk appetite, MJ, but we do know that can be the buy rounds where you might take a premium that's maybe at the top of their price. Maybe they've had a really good run of form and they're, priced above what you think they're going to average going forward. And especially if it's back-ended and it's around 14 or 15, you can actually just trade them, because what you see in the buy rounds is people go, I need to get numbers on field. I'm going to trade Charlie Constable, who hasn't played. He's 123K. I'm going to trade him to the rookie that's playing. And I think, why? You might trade him into someone that's going to score you a 30. If you're going to do it, go crazy. Move Paddy Cripps to someone that's actually off their bye, has a good matchup, is going to be comparable going forward, and get 100 points out of it. Because really, once you get to the buys, that player, that cow you traded Constable to, you're not going to have any trades to trade them out. So it's not like you're trying to harness their cash. You might as well just swing for the fences. So that's what you see people do.
Yep.
It's a gauntlet. It can come and bite you really hard in those last 4 or 5 rounds.
Very much so.
But it is a strategy that can, one, give you 100K, which is way more than you'd get from the Constable sideways to another cow. But sometimes you can get the timing right and get that guy that is the 115, 120 guy post-buy.
Yeah.
And your premium might have been the guy that was 120 up to the buy, and we see them go at 100, and it's still a really good year. But those are the moves that people do because they just think, I'm getting points this week.
Yeah.
I'm getting more cash out of it. And I'm not going to need that bench anyway. If I'm using the bench, I'm in massive trouble. It means my premium's injured on the field. So that is something that will come up a lot.
Yep.
And that is why if you do want to take a risk with a mid-pricer, we always say, pick them in the later buy rounds. Pick those around 14, 15 guys. Because if it blows up, at least you can just sideways them to someone else. So that would be my main advice. It's not for everyone. It is risky, but it is effective if you get it right. It's very effective.
And I'll tell you what, MJ, we've spoken about it a couple of times. It's been referenced, but doing a broad bent through the buys from someone with it's all you're doing there is playing the break-even game.
Yeah,
all
fixture
you're
and
doing is
break-even.
Trying to bank 100,000, go into someone who could potentially make that 100,000 back, whilst scoring points, who's had their buy and everything else. That's a play in this situation.
Yeah, 100%. Certainly is. Cause has also got a second question in AFL Fantasy. I'll throw it to you, Rids. He's looking at these 2 trades, Ashcroft to Mills or Warple up to Dawson. He's very keen on owning Jordan because he's currently owned by 52% of the comp. He needs to climb from his current rankings point of 7.7K. I'd like to flip his question. Is trading into Dawson going to help boost his rank?
No, it won't. Because pretty much most of the highest ranked players in the game have already got Dawson.
Correct.
So what rank is he, sorry?
7.7 thousand.
So all it's doing, trading into Dawson is more of a defensive move where you're gaining parity on a unique head-to-head matchup that was never going to fall your way. You're just getting parity on that head-to-head, and then you're trying to build a unique head-to-head that's going to favour you somewhere at a later date. Yeah. So that's why. The problem is, though, you might be better off. And I mean, I was talking to Vam earlier today about this sort of scenario. This is funny that's come up now. You might be better off taking 2 unique mid-price options instead of the higher price point of a Dawson.
Sure.
But both are valid. But do understand that you're taking Dawson to gain parity on the head-to-head. You're not actually doing anything. You're trying to eliminate a unique matchup that was favouring the other people.
Yeah, no, that's some really good advice. AFL fantasy question for you, Kane. It's from Josh. He somehow find a way to be ranked 700 in AFL fantasy, but he's had Peter Laddams rucking for him this year. So well done, Josh, on pulling that. He's like, safe to say it's time up. What's your opinion? Do I just go all the way up to an English, or am I saving some money and getting a Gorn? Won't be able to utilize the cash saved this week, but will make next week easier. He's currently leaning to Gorn, but doesn't seem like anything's getting in the way of Tim English at the moment. What's your take?
I would be Gorn there, MJ. I just think in that format with the with the zero, in that pricing at the moment, it's a guy that is clearly underpriced, and he looks really, really good. I know they're working in tandem, and sometimes, as we say, with these easier matchups. Now, Hawthorn did push Melbourne all the way last year when Melbourne was in actually really good form. So anything's possible, but I do feel like Gawn, if the worst case is he sits more forward in these wins, it's more likely to get that forward status. And I just feel like Melbourne know that he's still the guy. As much as they want to win with Grundy and Gawn in there, if push comes to shove, it will be Gawn. So I think in his position, as Riz said before, sometimes you need to get the parity and just cancel out that thing that's hurting you each week. But for mine, Gawn at that price, I know you can't harness the dollars this week, but as we say, it always makes next week easier having cash.
Well, I'll tell you what.
So
200k difference and DPP likely coming in 3 weeks' time.
And not just that, it's the buy as well, MJ.
Yeah, round 14.
He's got a round 14 buy, which is going to be very, very important come round 15. So massively. If you're able to find a way to get English in, let's just say Gawn gets that DPP at round 12, you're able to throw Gawn forward and find a way to get English into your team before the buys hit. You've actually got 2 rucks playing all the buys potentially.
Yeah, that could be a really big win. I loved that thought from both of you boys. Let's throw Wayno. We'll keep moving through because we do have a hard deadline. We've got to wrap up our podcast time. Wayno's got an AFL fantasy question for you, Ritz. Is it time to trade out Sarong? He's got a higher break even. Brayshaw's flying. He's got a bunch of other questions there about what he could do around it rather than break into those specifically. Sarong out, or is it just one bad game?
No, well, see, this is where it gets interesting, MJ. And this is, I only just mentioned it a minute ago, and I know there's a hard deadline, and I do apologise because Kane's hair's looking super tonight, ready for the date.
See the other half, that's where he's going.
If you told me at the start of the year you could trade Sarong to Mills and bank 100,000 out of it, you'd be crazy not to even explore that, especially if cash gen was so limited.
Challenging.
So, I mean, it is a viable option, It's just who you're trading into and what can you do. If you do go to a Mills in that instance where Sarong goes to a Mills and you free up 100,000, what does that 100,000 do to you on the second trade? So that's the sort of discovery. One thing I will say with Sarong, awesome pick. But now that Brayshaw's hitting form, it's going to prove to be very problematic because owning Sarong and trading into Brayshaw, I'm not sure how you could do that. I'm not sure how you could potentially trade out of Sarong because he's been such a great pick. It's going to feel awkward anyways. So you're just going to have to feel your gut feel on it, how your team is, and what you can do with the second trade if you do get exploratory.
Yeah, it's good.
I think that's spot on because that's the issue. That's the issue, isn't it, MJ? And we see that with these guys that start hot for various reasons. Sometimes they're just on. Sometimes, they score at the right time in a SuperCoach, which Sarong did a lot. But as Rid said, it's hard to have multiple, and especially when it's a team that's not great. Typically, the teams that can sustain multiple mids are the top tier guys that score a lot of points and they get all those great things. So it has been a great pick, but this is when it does get awkward, and that is maybe the advantage of an AF or the more trades we have. How long do you ride this for? Because that is the hard thing with the Sarong. He was the first buy. It's very hard to move him. You really want to hold him all the way through the buys, and sometimes by then, all that great work he did in the start of the season, all that cash he generated, it's eroded. So that's where, again, that's always the risk with those guys on the first buy in particular is the parachute plan gets really awkward because you're jettisoning off to someone that either has the same buy as him or has a buy to come. Whereas, clearly with someone in around 14, 15 or even the 13, which isn't an issue, you just clear the buys altogether. And we know how important of a strategy that is to maximising points and as a result, maximising rank.
Yep, it's good. All right, we'll fly through these final 4 questions. It's in SuperCoach. Peter Bull's got a question for you, Kane. He's currently ranked 1,200 and he's thinking of bringing in Noah Anderson. Is there something wrong with my thinking? Here's his 5 points. He's averaged 110 after the buys last year. A 110 average would currently make him a top 10 mid. excluding the current DPPs. He's currently fourth, so definitely in that contention. He has a possible bump against West Coast this week, and he's a vice-captaincy option. His buy could mean when others are playing a donut or a rookie, I could gain 60 to 110 plus points through some tough buys and max-ups. And even if he does go off, he'll be out of reach for other coaches trying to keep him as a point of difference. Is he dreaming?
No, it's definitely not. I am lucky that I get to watch a lot of football in my profession, which helps a lot. And this guy, I just can't be more impressed
He's phenomenal
with the balance in his game. I think that's something, MJ, we talk about a lot in our keeper stuff.
Yep.
He has gone to another level. Like, the influence is just outrageous now. I know Tuke's out, and a lot of people are aligning that to the spike, and numbers wise, you cannot argue with that.
Yep.
But how many times, I think we said it a few weeks ago anyways, sometimes these guys, you go, the start was just weird. For whatever reason, the team's trying to sync up for a new year. And then we sit back at the end of the year and go, wow, Noah Anderson went at 115. And you know what? If you take those first 3 weeks out, he was actually a 120 guy. And we're in the offseason saying this guy's value is
He's
premium.
A starter. Yeah, that's right.
Pedigree, not to get into our keeper chats, pedigree.
Tick.
Tick, 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 tick. Look at the consistency. How many games he's played already in his career.
Huge.
Like, unlike poor Matty Rowell, he hasn't missed a game, really. He's only missed a handful. And that's just so important to settling into the system. And he's got the mix. He's really smart. His running patterns, I would love to I haven't had the pleasure of just watching a game as a fan in the stands for Gold Coast. But his ability to find space between the boundary and the center square, he gets in these almost half areas, and the Suns use him and just link up, and he just creates. So
it's very Oliver-esque.
And I can't be more impressed with what he's done. And I think you're getting the bite. Now, clearly it's a massive bite-off. You are paying a lot.
Yep.
But I do think it is warranted. If you can afford that, he's going to help you so much in those 3 buy rounds where he is available.
Yep.
And we really just think this is a natural progression for him, isn't it? He was going to be the guy, and he's got the game now where Tuke does seem to get the attention. Now, there might be something. I did see Adam Simpson came out today and said he might get some attention.
Jimby might run with him, yep.
Yeah, but the way he moves and covers the ground, and he's got that mix, marks, kicks, tackles, all those things. And that's the thing, MJ. Now there's goals. Now he's getting it to those guys in the forward line, and there's a bit more synergy there for the Suns. And it's no surprise the Suns are playing better footy. And he's scoring, especially in the SuperCoach format that we're chatting about, has risen. So I couldn't be more impressed. And there is no way I'm talking anyone out of it, because I get the correlation with Tuke for a lot of people.
Sure.
But as he said, in 1 week, this guy's going to be 650. And if it is real,
my goodness,
it's see you later for a lot of other coaches. No, you're just not.
No,
so yeah, couldn't be more of a tick for me.
All right, Jared's got a dream team question for you, Rids. What's your thoughts on Callum Mills? The role, the volatility, but the value.
Callum Mills scares me, MJ.
Oh man, does he?
And it's not because of Callum Mills.
And teams today, that is one team bit of news that people haven't caught up on. Tom McCartan experienced some headaches this week and will be out. That was the thing I felt like as a community were like, yes, this back line, after just getting savaged with Rampy, the McCartan brothers both getting knocked out against Port, it was like, well, what's Horse meant to do? Like, he's got to put someone down back, and Mills is Mr. Fix-It. So sorry, Riz, but I just feel like that is just a massive bit of news.
It's a good catch.
Mills.
And it is a good it is because really it's an under pressure John Longmire. This is the first time for a while we have an under pressure John Longmire. Now, last year when they were going good, he used Mills as that defender, like to make sure they won certain games to extend into the finals. This year he's under pressure. So he's definitely opening that hatch when he needs to. Like, if you're going into the last quarter and you're 3 goals up and suddenly the opposition gets a run on early in that last quarter, that could be instant. Yep, Mr. Mills, go back straight now. And do not leave from back until we win that game of football, so I can actually win a game of football and take a bit of pressure off everyone. Yeah. So that's why I'm fearful.
Yep, I think that's fair. I suppose the optimist part goes, Man, more back line, pushing towards the buys. Now, he's going to need a lot of defensive time over the next 3 weeks to pick up DPP, but that's the other upside potential.
And MJ, he is the guy that can turn it on in a week.
Yes.
There were signs there last week. Now, Mills has always been good at finding the space for the marks, and we always speak about he doesn't actually get that much of the footy. He always wins it with a tackle or he wins it with a mark. So
yeah, correct.
There was something there last week for sure. The price in SuperCoach affords you to wait a week. Now, Freo's a funny matchup. Sometimes it's a lot of points given up. Sometimes they hog the footy. There has been some natural development of Gould and Rowbottom and Warner that eats into that, but this is a guy that at the drop of a hat, next month could be 150 and there could be a 200 in there. He has that.
He's got that in his wheelhouse.
So, sure. MJ, I'm going to throw this back at you for 1 second. Please. Now, let's remove the defensive discussion out of it.
Sure.
If Andy Brayshaw starts to get off the chain this week, what does Horse do? He's going to go talk to Mr. Mills again, who's become Mr. Fix-It for Sydney, and
he's
go,
the Jimmy
hey,
Bartell, isn't he?
Can you go sit on Brayshaw for a couple of minutes to try and quieten him down? Now, it could be a Rowbottom in that instance.
For sure.
It could be someone else. But if I'm John Longmire, I'm going to Mr. Mills to do that.
Yep, I think that's good. He'll eventually get to a price point where there will be no risk and it will only be upside. That will come. The question is when that will come is there. Last 2 questions. I'll answer one because it's a really easy one. I'll take the low-hanging fruit. Bandicoot wants to know, is Constable ever likely to play again this year? The answer is yeah. He was close this week based on Stewie's use. So Bandicoot, yeah, he's a chance. When that is, don't know. Last one, we'll throw it to you, Kane. Guy has a SuperCoach question. Thoughts on Whitfield? 449K, got a low break even, plus a couple of tons in the last few weeks. Should I find the extra cash and get him, or take a little bit of value in Sam Doherty?
Well, yeah, Doherty's obviously a little bit more than Whitfield, but I'd be going the Doherty path. It's just a fascinating mix because it seems like Jack Buckley and Haynes have really absorbed all the points that maybe we thought an Ash, a Cumming, and a Whitfield would get. Again, Whitfield's role's tough because he is tasked with biting off a lot. And SuperCoach, if you're an uncontested player and you turn the footy over,
it's tough.
It smashes you. So I don't see the Giants, being a top 8 team. I think it's really, really tough. Whereas Doherty, all that really concerns you in SuperCoach is he's just been a little bit turnover-centric in some of those early games. And it's funny, you look at last year, the start of the year, he was plus 10 points in the SuperCoach department, and he was in the 120 range. And in the back half, he was 10 under. So if you think that's going to right its wrong, and he's going to sort of even that up as the year goes, and we know he has no problem finding the footy, he's a guy that I look and go, well, he's sort of in the 110 bracket in DT still. He's just had a few little things go against him. Like, this is a guy that can do it, and he can match midfielders. So for me, at 509, with a break even in the high 70s, I know some of the fixtures aren't ideal coming up, but Doherty can be immune, and Carlton can be a team just ball hog wise that is a little bit immune to fixtures. I think he's the guy because looking in that backline, MJ, if you've got the Dawson, Dacos, Stewart, even a Sinclair who I love, it hasn't been the same as last year. Wanganeen Miller has been awesome. It's a little bit different. Doherty feels like a guy to me that can really be a tier above. And Whitfield, there's just a few things with the Giants. They're going to move things around. It doesn't seem to be the Whitfield that we know and love. So for me, I'd get to Doherty. I'd try to find that 60K, which can be a challenge. But yeah, I don't think you need to be shopping in that range. If I'm going to shop in that range, there's a Bailey Dale. You can time that up. He's 439.
Yikes.
Yeah, JJ's been brilliant since he went back, but he's coming off of 59. So you can time that in the next couple of weeks when it starts to open back up. You know, there's a string of 5 Marvel games in a row from round 12 to round 17, which we know he loves. So I think in the back half, when you see the role changes again for certain teams, this is when you can start looking at 350 to 400K players in SuperCoach that you say for 10 weeks, for 8 weeks, you know what, they can be close enough. I don't think that time's yet. I think it is coming though, post the buys.
Yeah, it's really good. You boys have been sensational. Kane, Rids, thank you both for your work on this podcast. We hope for you as you've been listening.
MJ, quick one. I'm just going to finish off on this note.
Yes.
You need to step up your hair game, mate. Kane's left you for dead today.
Oh, I've been married for nearly 20 years. The hair game is weak for me. So.
Whereas Kane's tried to get married for 20 years, which explains the hair game.
You do a whole podcast
all.
on Rids breaking down AFL players' haircuts and just how much influence it does have on the players he picks in his team.
Oh, it 100% does.
Off-season thing.
It's a big off-season thing for Rids. We've known that for sure. You boys have been sensational. Thank you for listening. If you haven't become a Patreon, it's all the links are in the podcast details for it. Otherwise, we'll be back next week with another strategy roundtable to help you through another week of fantasy footy. Good luck this week.